Okay, let's try and unpack this a bit. That constant hum, the background noise of our digital lives.
Yeah, the endless news about cyber threats, data breaches.
It really can feel like a tidal wave, can't it? And you flag some really interesting material for us. Stuff looking into SIEM tools and this whole open source versus proprietary software debate.
And just the general landscape of cybersecurity tools, it's a lot.
It is. So our mission today really is to try and cut through that noise, distill these resources down to the essential insights you actually need.
And what's really striking right off the bat is how central these SIEM tools are.
SIEM, Security Information and Event Management.
Exactly. For how organizations basically try to keep their digital house in order. Think of it as a security nerve center.
Okay.
It's an application, basically, designed to pull in and analyze all that log data.
Right. The detailed records of who did what when across all of the system.
Precisely. To monitor the really critical activities.
And the sources point out something key here. Even with these fancy systems gathering mountains of data,
It still heavily relies on humans, right?
yeah, on human expertise to actually figure out what it all means. So we're looking at two main documents you shared.
The future of SIEM tools and more about cybersecurity tools.
And that second one has a helpful glossary, too. So think of this as our guided tour, our deep dive, hitting the most important takeaways from this material.
And if we frame it as a mission, what are we trying to achieve?
Good question. I think first, we need to get a handle on how SIEM is evolving, to meet today's challenges.
Okay. And second?
Second, really clarify the difference between the main types of tools out there, specifically open source versus proprietary.
Makes sense. And ultimately, this should give you, the listener, a clear perspective on how to stay informed in this, constantly shifting security world.
Absolutely. All right, so let's jump right in. The evolution of SIEM. It's clear from the reading these aren't static tools.
Not at all. They're constantly changing. And a huge shift, as the material highlights, is towards the cloud.
The cloud. Okay, how so?
Well, the info points to two main ways SIEM is using the cloud. First, you've got cloud-hosted SIEM.
Right.
This is basically where a vendor manages all the underlying infrastructure for you.
So you just access it online like a service.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really attractive for organizations that maybe don't want to invest in or manage all their own hardware.
Yeah.
Takes that burden away.
Okay, so it's like renting versus owning the infrastructure, but then there's this other term, cloud native SIEM. What's the distinction there?
Cloud native goes a step further. These tools aren't just sitting in the cloud. They're actually built from the ground up to really leverage what the cloud offers.
Like what specifically?
Things like instant scalability, spinning resources up or down on demand, and high availability, making sure it keeps running.
Got it. So not just porting an old system, but designing it specifically for the cloud environment and its benefits.
Precise.
And the material links this evolution pretty strongly to the Internet of Things, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, think about it. So many more connected devices.
Everywhere. Watches, fridges, industrial sensors.
Right. And each one is a potential entry point for an attack.
Right.
It massively expands the attack surface organizations have to worry about.
And just the sheer volume of data they generate must be huge.
Exactly. That explosion in data, plus the fact that threat actors are always getting smarter, using more sophisticated tactics.
Yeah.
That whole complex mix is really driving the need for SIEM tools to keep evolving.
Okay, this leads us nicely into something really interesting the reading discusses. AI and machine learning.
Ah, yes. The game changers, potentially.
How are they expected to reshape what SIEM tools can actually do?
Well, what's really fascinating here is how AI and ML could fundamentally shift threat detection.
Away from just predefined rules.
Exactly. Instead of just looking for known bad signatures, AI can learn patterns in massive datasets. It can spot anomalies, things that look unusual.
Even if it's a completely new type of attack.
Potentially, yes. Identifying sophisticated threats that might otherwise slip through the cracks. The sources also mention improvements in, identifying threat-related language in log data.
Interesting. And better dashboards.
Enhanced dashboard visualization, yeah. Making it easier for humans to see what's going on, and also just more efficient ways to store all that data.
So less manual drudgery sorting through logs, more clear insights and smarter data handling. That sounds like a big step up.
It really is.
And then there's automation, and this term SOAR comes up.
Right. So, security orchestration, automation, and response.
Okay, unpack that a little. How does it fit with SIEM?
So SOAR is basically a collection of tools, but also, importantly, workflows. Defined processes.
Workflows that use automation.
Yes. to handle the response to security events. Think of it like creating automated playbooks.
Playbooks, like if X happens, automatically do Y.
Pretty much. So if a certain type of threat is detected by the SIEM, the SO component can automatically take predefined actions.
Like what? What kind of actions?
Oh, things like isolating a device that seems compromised.
Yeah.
Or automatically blocking a suspicious IP address. Routine stuff.
Ah, okay. So instead of an analyst having to manually jump on every single alert,
the system handles the common, repetitive tasks.
Which must free up a ton of time for the human analysts, right?
That's exactly the goal. Reduce the manual intervention for routine incidents.
So they can focus their brain power elsewhere.
Precisely. On the really complex, novel incidents that need critical thinking, problem solving, stuff automation can't really replicate yet.
Makes sense. The reading does mention, though, that while the tech exists for different security platforms to talk to each other,
it's still a work in progress, yeah. Getting everything truly interconnected and working seamlessly together, that's still evolving.
Right. Okay, so I've got a good picture of how SIEM itself is changing. Let's pivot now to the tools themselves.
Okay.
The material you shared breaks them down into two main camps: open source and proprietary. What are the key differences we need to grasp?
Fundamentally, it boils down to ownership and access.
Okay.
Open source tools, well, they're generally free to use. And crucially, their source code, the actual programming instructions, is publicly available.
Available for anyone to see and modify.
Yes. And that fosters this collaborative environment. A whole community of developers can contribute, find bugs, suggest improvements.
So it's like a group effort. What are the practical upsides for someone using these tools?
The information points out a few things. Often, they can be quite user-friendly, actually.
Really? Despite being community-driven?
Sometimes, because of it. Plus, that collaborative aspect, it can lead to really robust security.
How so?
Well, if lots of different experts are looking at the code, vulnerabilities might get spotted and fixed faster than in a closed system. More eyes on it.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else?
Yeah, the open nature allows for much greater customization. You can often tweak the software to fit your specific needs, maybe even build new features on top of it.
And the code and training materials are out there?
Often, yes. Which helps people learn how to use and modify them.
Got it. Okay, so that's open source. What about the other side, proprietary tools?
Proprietary tools are developed and owned by a specific company, a vendor.
Like the examples mentioned, Splunky or Google SecOps Chronicle.
Exactly. And typically you pay a license fee to use them. There might also be costs for training, updates.
And the source code.
That stays private. Locked down. Only the vendor who owns it can access or modify the core code.
So it's more of a black box in a way. You use what they give you.
Kind of. You're relying on the vendor for everything, the updates, the support, new features.
And the reading suggests you have less ability to customize.
Generally, yes. Users usually have limited ability to tailor features to their exact needs.
Yep.
You're more tied to the vendor's development roadmap.
Right. Now, there's often this perception, isn't there, that open source, because it's often free, might be, I don't know, less effective, less secure.
Yeah, that's a really common misconception.
What does the material say about that?
It tackles that head on, actually. It pushes back against the idea that open source is inherently less safe or capable.
Oh.
It emphasizes that many open source projects have actually become industry standards over time. They're proven, reliable, robust.
So free doesn't mean low quality or insecure.
Not at all. In fact, it argues that the public access to the code can be a security advantage.
How is that? That seems counterintuitive.
Because the code is out there, open for review by potentially thousands of developers and security researchers. Vulnerabilities often get found and fixed very quickly. That public scrutiny makes it harder for flaws, or even malicious backdoors, to hide for long.
Interesting. So the transparency is actually a strength, almost like a massive ongoing peer review.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Okay. The reading gives a couple of specific open source examples, Linux and Suricata. Let's touch on Linux first. Why is it relevant here?
Well, Linux is mentioned as a hugely popular open source operating system.
Right. Powers a ton of servers, Android phones.
Exactly. Its relevance in cybersecurity comes from its high degree of customizability.
Right.
Especially using the command line.
Okay.
Because it's the base layer between the hardware and the applications, you can really fine-tune it for specific security needs, way more than you often can with proprietary OCs.
And there are different versions, right? Distributions.
Yeah, the reading notes, there are various Linux versions tailored for specific tasks, and also that we'll talk more about it later.
Got it. Foundational adaptable software. What about the other ones, Suricata?
Suricata is described as open source software specifically for network analysis and threat detection.
So it watches the network traffic.
Exactly. It inspects the traffic flowing across the network in real time, looking for anything suspicious or malicious based on rules and patterns, and it generates logs.
Logs that could feed into a SIEM, presumably?
Precisely. It helps identify potential threats by watching activity patterns, who's talking to whom, what kind of data is moving.
And it's developed by the OISF.
Yes, the Open Information Security Foundation. They're committed to keeping it open source and free.
And it's widely used.
The reading said so, yeah.
Yeah.
And government, private sector.
Yeah.
And importantly, it integrates well with SIEMs and other security tools. Again, it's mentioned we'll cover Suricata in more detail later, too.
Okay. Right. We've covered a lot of ground here. Let's try and pull the threads together.
Good idea.
We started by establishing SIEM tools as sort of the central nervous system for security data in an organization.
Exactly. And the big takeaway there is just how indispensable they are for monitoring what's happening.
So for anyone listening who's interested in cybersecurity,
Even at an entry level, yeah, chances are very high you'll interact with SIEM dashboards. It's fundamental.
and for you just wanting to stay informed, understanding that SIEM isn't static is key.
Absolutely crucial. Knowing about these shifts, the move to the cloud, better application integration, all this automation, that's vital for adapting to how cybersecurity itself is changing. You need to keep learning about it.
Yeah. And then on the tools themselves, the open source versus proprietary thing.
The takeaway isn't that one is definitively better. It's that both play critical roles.
They just have different strengths and weaknesses, different models.
Right. Both have unique characteristics, unique advantages. Understanding both gives you a much fuller picture of the cybersecurity toolkit that's out there.
Okay, so summing it all up. SIEM's future, it's looking very cloud-centric, increasingly smart with AI, and more automated to handle the sheer scale of things.
Definitely. Managing complexity and speed.
And the tools we use to defend ourselves, it's a mix. You've got powerful, free, community-driven, open-source options.
And you've got commercially developed, supported proprietary tools. Both are essential parts of a solid security strategy, just offering different things.
So hopefully for you listening, maybe feeling a bit swamped by all the cyber news.
Yeah, that feeling of being overwhelmed we mentioned at the start.
Hopefully this deep dive has helped make these critical areas, SIEM, open source, proprietary tools, a bit clearer, a bit more digestible.
We hope so, giving you that efficient but thorough understanding you are looking for.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with, building on all this. Considering how fast everything changes, the threats, the defensive tech,
It's incredibly rapid.
what do you think will be the single biggest challenge facing cybersecurity professionals, say, in the next 5 years? Something to chew on.